Well, the newest Nintendo Switch Online update is officially live. You can update your Game Boy Advance application right now and play 3 different titles. And in today's video, I want to do just that with you all, share my initial gameplay impressions to these classic Mario Advance games, and have a broader conversation with how we may see Nintendo handle their updates from here with the Game Boy Advance and the other consoles on the system going forward. What's up, nation? Make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification if you haven't already. And as mentioned, guys, today we are checking out the brand new 3 titles that were just added into the Game Boy Advance library of games for Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack subscribers. Now, we'll dive into a lot of the update history and what we've seen so far with Nintendo and maybe what to expect. And we'll start it off with Super Mario World because that's the one that I have the most nostalgia for personally. There's a lot of complaints online around this update because, yes, these are technically games that are playable already on the service, but I do think that to counter that argument a little bit, it is nice to have some additional content that's behind these games and additional layouts. Not only that, and you do notice a downgrade in the sound quality for sure, but I know that a lot of people grew up and were originally exposed to Mario through these games, because if you grew up as a kid and you owned a Game Boy Advance, maybe that was the only console you had, and then now you get the option to go back and experience the exact version of what you remembered. So I actually tend to think that it's at least worth them putting them on the service, and I am a fan of the fact that they added 3 in at once, because I think that that's the big thing, and we're already going to take an L right out of the gate. But you know, that's the big thing in terms of how they could have drip feed these games rather, and they didn't. So I'm really glad to see that they have at least entertained the idea that we could see more than one Game Boy Advance game at a time. Granted, because of the situation that these games are in, with kind of all being already released and they're kind of all in the same batch of games, we may not see Nintendo do this with the other games and the other releases. Oh, you know what? This is a good question, because I don't actually remember. How would you do the I'm assuming you would have to, okay, R is the button, because I was like, we don't have the traditional button layout here on how you would on the NES. I don't know that we will see them go to 3 games regularly for Game Boy Advance. I'm definitely not going to set my expectations towards that, but at the same time, for certain games that are, you know, those versions that are version specific, and maybe you grew up with these versions and you want to play them, I do think that it's nice that they didn't spread this out over 3 different months of content updates. You know, think of that, and think of how much fans would have really complained if, oh, it's just one Mario game for this month and then that's all we're going to get for Game Boy Advance. I haven't been the biggest fan of the whole no communication portion of the updates for NSO, but I will tell you, at least Nintendo has not gotten wildly inconsistent with, we're at least getting something on some console most months. And it does seem that they're very much in an alternating route right now, where on months that we get GBA, we don't get N64, and vice versa. I personally think that that's what we're going to see. God, that audio does sound awful though. Compared if you boot up the NES version right now compared to the GBA, it is a noticeable downgrade. I know that's because of the sound chip and things within the Game Boy Advance, obviously, but it is still kind of funny to hear the differences when me personally, I spent all my time on the SNES version of this game, so this is definitely a downgrade when it comes to audio. I'm not entirely sure of all the differences in between the games and the versions either. I did read through some of the comments that explained it in the last video, so thank you for that. But from my understanding, it looks like the 100% differences are slightly, like, what the requirements for it are slightly different. Yoshi coins turn into Peach coins in this if you get them all, or something along those lines. There's different requirements for what changes, you know, the enemies. Basically, there's one level too, I think, that was added in it may have been Yoshi's Island. So, you know, it's one of those that this is not going to reinvent the wheel or change anything very much from the existing games that you know and love. But again, I'm happy that Nintendo put these games on the service for people who grew up with these versions, because I think that nostalgia is, you know, a heck of a drug and people love it. And if you remember a game a certain way, you kind of want to see it with that same tone and feel. You notice a color difference as well. And then in terms of really what to expect from here with updates, you know, as mentioned, N64 and GBA seem to be rotating, and then from what I can tell, all of the base tier, Game Boy Advance, or not Game Boy Advance, Sega Genesis seems to be random to me, and then all the other kind of console updates seem to be random as far as like the base tier consoles, the Game Boy Color, the NES, SNES. It seems like we just get a batch update of those games every so often, and you really can never tell if they're going to be consistent with it, if it's going to be every other month, if it will go 3 months without an update. But I do think that, loosely speaking, 1 per month is a safe expectation for either GBA or N64 games. And that's a big deal too, because if you think about the expansion pack tier and where we're at with it, you pay $50 annually, which is not expensive, as expensive as some of the competitors, if you look at it from that perspective. But in terms of, you know, in terms of the overall value that they're bringing for that, other than online play, there's really not a whole lot in terms of additional things that you get. And, you know, you can look at the value of what these games have to offer and say that that's worth that price point. But I still hate to see that we have no official roadmap or communication or commitment from Nintendo, and yet they can charge us 12 months at a time for the service. But to me, I think it's gotten a lot better since we've gotten these additional consoles added in. That said, there's still some changes that I would like to see happen with really just more of some kind of roadmap. You know, I mean, we don't know for sure that we're going to get an N64 game next month. We would like to think we will based off of history, but Nintendo's just kind of getting away with, you know, really adding in the games as they please. And I just think when they're charging 12 months up front, that's not the best business model for a subscription. Granted, when we do get games, it's always a fun surprise because it's just, oh, here we go, newest update is out, go update it now. Granted, we do also see a difference in how they do GBA and N64 games versus the other consoles. We see an advanced announcement, no pun intended, for Game Boy Advance and for N64, and then we just kind of see a surprise shadow drop for the other consoles more often than not. This is actually, you know, I probably should go back through and replay this Mario game again. This is one that I didn't spend near as much time on as a kid, because even before I knew that this was like a repackaged Doki Doki Panic for the whole history behind this, it never felt like a Mario game to me. Like, it kind of did, but it always felt so different. And I always used to say too, like, I felt like Zelda 2 and Mario 2, I don't know how to get that one up. Zelda 2 and Mario 2 were like the experimental games. They felt way different than the originals, and then they went back to the other style after the fact. And I always thought that that's what this game was for Nintendo, and then you grow up later on and you figure out that this was actually like a last minute, you know, supplemental, oh no, give America Doki Doki Panic and reskin it as Mario 2 because they're gonna not know what to do with the difficulty of the game that we created over in Japan. So they thought we weren't ready for that difficulty punch, and anyway, that's why we got the Mario 2 that we have today over in this region of the world, at least. I think in all regions of the world other than the US, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, all that said, we shrunk back down to small Mario. And I think you used to not start out as small Mario, and now you do. They tried to do some stuff in the Game Boy Advance version to make it feel more like the traditional Mario game. But you know, I actually do enjoy just playing through this right now, like having just gripping items and throwing them at enemies instead. Again, it feels different than a traditional Mario game. So we'll play with Luigi. He jumps just a little bit higher. And I did like that there were stats attached to the characters and things. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with the rest of these NSO updates. But, you know, I really do hope that we get to some kind of thing where it's N64 and GBA, because I do think that would make the once per month, rather, like each one of them get an update every month. I feel like that would definitely soften the blow with that $50 annual price point. And then let's see if we can jump at the right time. There we go. And then if we get one of those per month, and we also see something like a base console update once per month, and it can be anything, whether it be Game Boy, whether it be NES, SNES, a mix of the two. But Nintendo really, if they're going to continue NES and SNES support at all, they really have to start spending some money on the licensing fees. I would love to see, you know, games that were really big on the consoles whenever they were originally out that we just don't see Nintendo do anymore. Wow, it is hard to play this with an analog. Maybe I should switch to the D-pad on my Pro controller. You know, I think that we should see games like the Mickey Mouse games from back in the day, Goof Troop, that I have so much nostalgia for and is like a ton of fun to me. And then there's, you know, the Star Wars games. There's stuff that will have red tape behind it around the licensing and getting the rights for it, no doubt. But if Nintendo would spend that money, because they're clearly making enough money off NSO with all of the active monthly subscribers that they have, I think that would make those consoles live a lot longer, and you could start to get excited for NES and SNES updates again, instead of just, gosh, I'm not used to Luigi's higher jump. That is definitely throwing me off. Oh wait, he kind of like glide down if you hold? This is how long it's been since I played this game. I think that eases the blow, though, personally, for those consoles, because right now when I see NES and SNES, I'm assuming the worst. I'm assuming discount bin, bottom of the barrel, very cheap games that you would probably find, you know, for $1 or less back in the day. And that's kind of what it's been lately. But they get to some kind of more consistent update roadmap schedule. They go to one new N64 game and GBA game per month, and then they do something in the realm of just a more consistent roadmap schedule, and then they're just rotating out all the different consoles, and one day we get GameCube added into the service. This still has a big upside for the future, not to mention the fact, the very biggest thing that we'll close out the video with is just the conversation around this service will roll forward to what's next. And that's very exciting, because if you look at Virtual Console, even though you technically could buy the games and add them into your library, which I wish that Nintendo would give us an option to do that here, but they don't, it's one of those things that with Virtual Console, you had to restart each generation, and you had to rebuy the games and re-wait for them to come out. We are not going to be in that situation this time. Nintendo has said themselves that Nintendo account rolls forward and the value added services with it in their investor slide. That would imply that is, of course, referencing Nintendo Switch Online. So next time around, basically the big libraries that we have today, they just all work on your Switch 2 out of the gate, or whatever's next. And then we can just continue to build on that momentum and get things like GameCube, maybe Dreamcast added in, one day Wii. And what would be great is if Nintendo comes up with some kind of controller for the DS and 3DS, and they really build out the service. I do think they have the ability to make this a, Disney Plus level game, if they are level subscription service, when it's all of Nintendo's IP that you know and love, and you're just going to be able to play them however you want, whenever you want. If they do it right, I think that they can turn NSO into something that's a must-own service for every kind of Nintendo Switch player and every Nintendo Switch owner. I think it's that for a lot of people today, but it's, others just pass it up. So I think it's come a long way. It's gotten a lot better than what we once saw it as, but we definitely still can definitely make some progress on the service. But we'll go ahead and cut the video here in the interest of time, even though I kind of want to just keep playing this game, honestly. Like I'm having some fun with it, even though I'm dying. Okay, that's a good sign to end it. So I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, your thoughts and opinions on this latest round of updates. Are you going to be checking out any of these new Mario games that we have, which you can obviously rewind? I normally don't do that, but are you going to hop into any of these games? Are you kind of like let down that it's literally the exact same games that you can already play, with, of course, just the version exclusives and things that are different? Or are you somebody who, you're actually pumped to check out these versions because maybe these are how you played it personally? So let me know all that stuff in the comments down below, and let me know what you hope we see from the future of the service, period, in terms of new games and consoles and support and all of that. So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.